Hey everyone, Teddy Bear here, and welcome to a BTD 6 version comparison video where I compared the previous version of the game to the current version of the game. Right now, the previous version of the game is currently 29.4, and the current version of the game is 30.1. Well, I will be comparing version 29.4 to version 30.0, just obviously the patch notes and everything. Anyways, let's get into it. Our first change to cover up is the Juggernaut. In version 29.4, it used to do +2 damage towards ceramic balloons, making it do, in total, 4 layers of damage towards ceramic balloons in that version. But now in version 30.0, it now does an additional +3 damage towards ceramic balloons, making it do in total 5 layers of damage towards ceramics instead of 4. But to completely honest with you guys, the extra ceram damage isn't going to really make Juggernaut any better for its current playstyle at the moment. And to be honest, I wish it had a little bit more Pierce instead, because, well, therefore it will be compatible with more Glaives and Recursive Cluster, since it is, like, the cheaper one of the three. But since they, like, obviously did the rework with its damage and Pierce, just so it does better towards normal balloons while still having the same amount of damage output, I kind of wish it has a little bit more Pierce, just so it actually competes with more Glaives and Recursive Cluster at some point in the future. Next up is the Crossbow Master, and surprisingly, Crossbow Master hasn't got a buff ever since 17.0, which was, like, 2 years ago on April, you know, when the Holly Gwen skin got released and all that? Yeah, that long ago. Well, Crossbow Master finally got a buff. It's now 1.5k cheaper than it was before, so now it's much more cheaper compared to the other... Oh, wait, never mind. So Navarch and Terra also got, you know, pretty big price buffs. In fact, it's even bigger than Crossbow Master's price buff. So, never mind, but... Hey, at least Crossmaster is a lot cheaper than it was before, on the bright side, and at least you can afford a little bit more sooner, and you can get your second late game tell a lot sooner now. So my overall thoughts on the change is that Crossmaster definitely deserves some sort of buff at some point at this current time of the game, because obviously, yeah, Crossmaster is just getting outclassed by Avatar, Tech Terror, sometimes Elite Defender. Well, not really the case, because Elite Defender can pop lead balloons, Predator heavily, but yeah. I think they could try and find other ways they can make Crossbow Master a lot better than it is right now. Next up is Glaive Lord. Glaive Lord. Yeah, Glaive Lord got a very interesting change in this update. Glaive Lord's main attack, not the orbital glaives, the attacks where it hits the mob class balloons and it gives them the toenail DOT effect, like I said in the previous patch note comparison video. Yeah, the main attack now does 8 layers of damage per hit to each individual balloon it hits, and it has 100 PS, by the way, instead of having 1 layer damage. So that way, the 520 crosspath, like as I'm showing you on the screen, which is pre-patch, which is an outclassed crosspath. Like, there's no reason to go for it. It's weaker, and you have to get mid for it to pop lead balloons, which was not worth it in compared to the 502 Glaive Lord, which enhances the orbital glaives by a long shot. But now they finally giving it a little bit more love this update, and this time, since it obviously only makes the main attack faster and gives the DOT last longer, since they left that mechanic in the game and all that, because, you know, it used to stack a lot faster. But yeah, aside from that, the main attack now does 8 layers of damage, and as you can see, the ceramics are already getting shredded really quickly, because each of them are getting hit by an additional 8 layers of damage from the main attack. Because obviously with the Red Hot Rangs it goes up to 9 layers, versus having much more faster attack speed. But obviously Red Hot Rangs is still a little bit better in my opinion, because, well, they both still perform really well, the 520 and the 502 now. It's just 502 is just a little bit better due to, well, you don't have to spend a lot of money on mid, but in general. And also, you can actually have a little bit more freedom on where you want to place your Glaive Lord anywhere in the map you want, while still having lead bomb power anyways. Next up is Bionic, Boomerang, and Turbocharge. Since they both have like a very small price swap around, I'm just going to cover them up right now at the same time. So, Bionic Boomerang is now $150 cheaper, but on the other hand, Turbocharge is $200 more, making both Turbocharge and Permacharge about $50 more, which is like basically nothing at this point. So, the reason they did this change is just so Bionic Boomerang is just a slightly better early game tower. And I've did use it a few times before, and there's just much better options out there, to be honest. But hey, it's there anyways. But I wish it kind of got a price buff, because I feel like Moab Dom's a little bit expensive from the times I've been playing, well, chimps with the tower. and it just felt a little expensive, and I feel like a price buff would be a little bit more better than a damage buff. A damage buff is fine, but it already does like decent amount of damage. I just feel like it's just a little expensive, that's all. Well, I guess wishes do come true after all. This is exactly what I wanted for Moab Dom, a price buff. And in fact, this was like a lot bigger than I thought it was needing. Moab Dom is now a $50,000 upgrade tier 5 instead of a $60,000, which means on Chimps mode, it's $10,800 cheaper. So it's so much more cheaper, which means you can get sooner, and also you can get like support afterwards, because obviously its SRAM damage, its DT damage are not really that great, and its single target damage isn't that amazing for the bad either. It's just mainly good against like ZMGs and BFBs and all that. And I've already made a video based on Moab Dom's price buff as well, compared to its old price to its new price with the same strategy, so I recommend you guys check that video out. Next up we have another Moab Mauler nerf. This time, Moab Mauler no longer does additional damage towards ceramic balloons. Before, it used to do additional layer of damage towards ceramics. Before, it used to be like +5, so it used to do 6 layers of damage towards ceramics. There used to be a strategy where you can just get away with Moab Mauler spam alone and very little support. Now, there's Moab Mauler spam, which is still prevalent as a strategy, but you need support such as, well, Icicles, which I'll get into later with that change, by the way. So yeah, now Moab Mauler it still damages ceramics, but it's like the same as the base bomb tower at this point. This Moab Mauler nerf isn't going to really make Moab Mauler spam any more worse anyways, because, well, you have ice towers and everything. But here's a little bit of a weird bug, where the actual fuck did this Moab Mauler just shoot over a ceramic? I thought it whiffs, but now it doesn't, but instead it now shoots over the balloons if they get too close to it. What the fuck? Next up is Ring of Fire, and Ring of Fire finally got a buff in this update, but this is not the kind of buff I was expecting it to get. But anyways, it got a buff. A buff is a buff. So, Ring of Fire's attack delay has been reduced from 0.5355 seconds to 0.4725 seconds. So that means Ring of Fire now attacks a bit faster than usual. Even though I feel like Ring of Fire just needed to do 3 times more mob damage towards mob class balloons, because I don't think it will never be a good group damage option because of its, well, PS isn't as good as more glaives or recursives, and its range is too tiny as well on top. But I feel like it'll be a little bit better if it was like an early game type tower. But at the moment, it's just heavily outclassed by Overdrive because its mob damage just sucks. And I think it just needs to do 3 times more damage towards mob class balloons to be any better if they were trying to make Ring of Fire any better than it is right now. Because at the moment, it's kind of one of the weakest tier 4s in the game, in my opinion. Next up is the tier 5 version of Ring of Fire called Inferno Ring, or I like to call it Inferno Thing, because, well, you know, it's a thing, it's Inferno. Where does the Inferno come from? Anyways, so we know that Ring of Fire attacks slightly faster. That buff does not apply to Inferno Ring, so which means Inferno Ring's main attack still attacks the same speed as before, so it's unchanged. But one thing that did got changed is its crosspaths for its media attack. The media attack is the most useful part about Inferno Ring. Hence why I think Inferno Ring is quite strong, because if you give it pierce buffs, the media will hit more than one target, because by default it isn't really that good. But now crosspathing it will now enhance the media even further, not just the main attack now. So Millpath 520 now gives it more pierce, makes the media base pierce go from 1 to 2. So it'll go through the target and then it'll explode onto the second target. But obviously when it goes through the first target, it'll still give the same attack damage output, like an explosion effect, like it does when it expires, when it hits a pierce cap and all that. But also the other crosspath, the superior crosspath I like to call it, 502 Inferno Ring, even more attacks, now makes the media damage go from 700 damage to 1000 damage on impact. Which easily makes the 502 crosspath a bit better, because obviously you can just give it pierce buffs, which obviously, on hindsight, if you just give Strongest Sim Alchemist and Primary Training to the 520, the extra additional pierce is not going to scale too much, or not make that much of a difference, compared to, well, 502, where every bit of impact will do 1000 damage instead of 700, which is way stronger than just having an additional pierce, as long as you have support for Inferno Ring. Next up, we only have Icicles that got changed in this update, and Icicles got a $750 price nerf. That's like literally increasing almost 50% of its price alone as an upgrade. Well, obviously it's not really 50% increase if you're spending a lot of money on Crowd Cannon and the earlier upgrades and all that. But I meant like the upgrade alone, it's nearly 50% more expensive than it was before on any upgrade, any modes in general. It's like going from a sharpshooter price to a Bloon Jitsu price. That's how big of a price difference it is. And I still think Icicles are still going to be pretty good. Or if not, because it's that expensive. Who knows? These changes I'm showing you on the screen are apparently classified as bug fixes and all that. But since they're so prevalent, I kind of want to include them as kind of like buffs or reworks kind of thing. So yeah, what they did here is that Corrosive Glue before couldn't have mixture dip before. I already did this on the other video, which was like 2 months ago. I think that was the other video with the Moab Dom video and all that. They made it where mixture dip no longer applies on glue gunners because it didn't work on them at all. But now they brought it back, but only on the Corrosive Glue upgrade or any glue gunner that's cross-pathed with Corrosive Glue. So it's an optional path if you want your glue gunner to do a little bit more damage now with mixture dip. Which, to be honest, they should have done this. They should make it where Berserker Brew or any form of damage buffs should affect top half glue gunner's DOT effect. Then I think top half glue would be a lot better. But at the moment, this is kind of like a step in a good direction with mixture dip now actually working on the Corrosive Glue's DOT effect. Next up is Super Glue. Super Glue now has gotten a bug fix where it can now glue glued balloons again. And let me be honest, I do not like this change. Here's the reason why. So, here's a little bit of the story. Back in version 23.0, that was when Super Glue was first bugged. And before that, Super Glue used to re-glue balloons, but in that update in particular, when they did a change where Relentless Glue now overlaps Mob Glue, it completely broke Super Glue completely. And yeah, I've noticed it because I did like a cracked run with it in version 23.0, which was a long ass time ago. And I've noticed it was so bad because it couldn't even re-glue a single balloon. It has to wait out the entire Mob Glue effect. Not the Super Glue one, it's tier 3 effect. Like, you know when the balloons thaw out from the Super Glue effect, they're still in the Mob Glue effect before going back to normal. Yeah, it couldn't re-glue them at all until they're fully weared off. It was that bad. And they did like a bug fix in 26.0 or 27. I think it was 27.0. I don't remember. It's been a little bit while. 27.0. Super Glue now re-glues the Mob Glue effect, which means it can't re-glue its own glue effect. Like when it's already super glued, it will target a different balloon. That's the one thing that makes Super Glue really good, because it divided its glue effect. Because then obviously the ones that are getting like the Mob Glued or not glued can get glued, because then obviously Super Glue's PS is not getting wasted on already being glued on balloon. It also, and it applied to ceramics, it ignored the ceramics until the whole ceramic is completely weared off. And to be honest, I prefer that change, because Super Glue, it was a lot better. Because obviously when the ceramic is glued, it's going to stay glued for a very, very long ass time. As you can see in this version, where the footage it could be in, the ceramics get glued for a very long ass time. But now the problem is that Super Glue will now keep tagging that balloon, wasting its pierce for no reason, even though it's like doing no damage, and all it's doing is just resetting the duration. Even though its pierce and attack speed is slow, but its stun duration is like very effective. And that's the problem I have with Super Glue in this update now. I've tried a few runs with Crossbow Master and Churchill on Inferno Shims. It still worked, but it felt a lot more sketchier because there was so many balloons that were getting through, because Super Glue keeps gluing the wrong balloons. And it's just so underwhelming. And even more worse, Super Glue with Glue Soak, the Relentless Glue did not overlap the ones that already been glued as well. So Relentless Glue was so much more effective with Glue Soak. Hence why I always go for the 105 Super Glue crosspath and just give it a few more pierce buffs, just so it's actually, good enough to hit multiple balloons. Because if it has Glue Soak, it has piercing attacks instead of splash attacks like Glue Splatter. Even though Glue Splatter has more pierce, the Glue Soak crosspath makes it where if the ceramics get glued by it, it will ignore the ceramics and focus on the mobs. And then your DPS style like Crossmaster, Sun Avatar, or Tech Terror can destroy the ceramics, spawning more Relentless Glue for more upcoming balloons that are Super Glue that will probably get overwhelmed by now. And it makes Super Glue so good on gluing, despite its attack speed and PS being so low. But now, they kind of took that away, and now it just glues the same balloon again. Even though Ice Compare and Balloon Crush did the same thing as well, but the thing is, they have much more pierce, and they attack much faster, more reliably. Super Glue only has the longer glue effect, with the same price as Ice Compare, but now it's terrible. Because it's wasting its pierce on already slowed down balloons, so it's just going to get overwhelmed by the upcoming balloons that it hasn't glued yet, because it's not diverting its pierce at all. To be honest, I kinda wish they reconvert the bug fix, because I kinda like the bugged version a little bit more. That's just my opinion. Or they could just try and make Super Glue a little bit more effective, but it wouldn't really be the same as it was before, to be honest. Next up is Bouncing Bullets, and I definitely expected to get a nerf at some point, but the nerf it got was not what I was actually expecting. The nerf I was expecting to get was like a price nerf at some point, because it is like such a really good early game tower, but single target damage is horrendous unless the balloons are really close to each other, then the shrapnel would do a lot more damage together, just like Hydra rocket pods. But no, instead it got a bounce distance nerf, which means how far the bullets bounce between targets, depending how spaced they are. So before it was 50 distance, now they reduced it down to 40 distance. But if you crosspath it with large caliber, however, it brings it back up to 50, which, to be honest, is fair because no one really uses the large caliber crosspath anymore. I did use it before they, buffed shrapnel to able to be inherit to damage and pierce buffs now, where Berserker Brew was really good, so you see it bounce a lot more, but I think it's because it just does so much more damage. I don't know why I tested on this map. I should have tested on a more split path type of map, then you would see a lot more. Next up is Full Auto Rifle and Elite Defender. In this update, they got a pretty nice buff towards their damage output towards mob class balloons for having lack of lead popping power from, well, I think it was version 28.0, I think it was? Yeah, it was. So anyways, Full Auto Rifle now does an additional layer of damage towards mob class balloons with its main attack. It does not work with Shrapnel Shot, and I'm not sure how strong it would be if it did work with Shrapnel Shot. I'm not really sure. But anyway, so Full Auto Rifle now does an additional layer of damage towards mob class balloons, so its single target damage is slightly better. But for Elite Defender, it's plus 2 damage towards mob class balloons. And Elite Defender's main attack by default towards every balloon but mob class balloons at this point does 2 layers of damage. But now it does an additional 2 layers of damage towards mob class balloons, making it do double the amount of damage towards single target damage. And that's not it. Its inferior crosspath, for the most part, the large caliber crosspath, including Full Metal Jacket, each individual upgrade now give an additional layer of mob damage. So when you get Full Metal Jacket, it'll now do 7 layers of damage towards mob class balloons instead of 4, which is about the same amount of damage as the old 205 large caliber Elite Defender's damage output. But with the new large caliber Elite Defender's damage output, it now does additional 4 layers of damage towards mob class balloons, making it do 11 damage per shot. Full Metal Jacket does plus 3, and the base tower does plus 2. I've already made a video, like the same video with the Mob Dom video I've already mentioned earlier, which also involves Elite Defender as well, so I, again, recommend that video again if you guys forgot about it or so. Just a little bit of a reminder, just to let you guys know I've done a strategy based on Elite Defender's mob damage buff as well, alongside of Mob Dom's price buff as well. A quick pet talk here. The background gameplay is literally 4 times the speed than usual. Meanwhile, all the other comparisons, which are as fast as they can be, are 2 times speed. It's because this one is in particularly had to be in a different iMovies file just to be even faster because of how long they are. Because there's not really much I can talk about Elite Defender, to be honest. The new 205 Elite Defender can now take out the bad layer. Okay, bye. Next up is the Ballistic Missile. So the base Ballistic Missile attack has been increased from 1.105 seconds to 0.9945 seconds, which means it now attacks a little bit faster without the need of airburst dots in general. But at the same time, 032 Ballistic Missiles no longer adds 10% increased rate. So that 10% increased rate is now moved into the base Ballistic Missile. So in other words, you can say that the 030 is 10% faster, but 032 in the current update at the same time is the same as before. It's because the Chiqui thinks that airburst dots is like so good for early game in general that you don't really need to increase in its attack speed any further. But instead of removing it as a nerf, they're just moving that attack speed into the base Ballistic Missile, so it makes the advanced intel crosspath, or just the base tower itself, even better than it was before. That's just a quick summary, by the way. My opinion on the change is that I honestly don't really care much about these types of changes, because it's nothing too special to really talk about. And also at the same time, it's making the crosspaths less interesting because, well, obviously one of the crosspaths being the better crosspath. And to be honest, I feel like at this point we already know that Ballistic Missile with Advanced Intel is starting to become the better crosspath. So hopefully this stop increasing Ballistic Missile's attack speed any further, because I think it's already good as it is right now. Now we're into our first ever Paragon nerf this time. Navarch of the Sea's passive grapple hook rate has been decreased from 0.02 seconds to 0.06 seconds, which it has this like passive Pirate Lord type attack where it attacks every 0.2 seconds from the last update. Now they nerfed it to be 3 times slower to 0.06 seconds, but to be honest, it's really fast in general that you can't really tell the difference. Even between versions, you will still not be able to tell the difference anyways. I haven't mentioned about the boat Paragon until now, so here's the reason why. Navarch of the Seas was released last update, and in the last update I didn't have time at all with the patch notes. But for 30.0, I had a lot more time with it, because they showed us the patch notes way before 30.0 came out. Meanwhile, 29.0, I had no time at all. It came out at the same day as when they showed us the patch notes. And that's when they showed us, well, the new Paragons, such as, or the latest Paragon, the Buccaneer Paragon, Navarch of the Seas. So anyway, so the next nerf it also got, that's not just the only nerf, the Navarch Active Grapple Hook, which is, it's the only Paragon with ability, as you can see. The cooldown has been increased from 20 seconds per cooldown to 30 seconds per cooldown, which you will see in a minute. But until you go into a higher degree, where it says all Paragon ability cooldowns will now increase rate in a similar formula to attack speed. So if the Paragon is at degree 100, it'll get decreased. The cooldown itself would be decreased down to 20 seconds. Which, to be honest, they should have done that once Navarch of the Seas was first released, because Navarch of the Seas is really strong compared to the other Paragons. And that's my opinion. And I still think it still would be really strong. It's just now there's a little bit more reasons to give it a higher degree. It's just at a very low degree, it was so good. It can basically solo round 200. That's how strong it is. The cool thing about the ability, first off, is that it can take out 2 bats. It has limited uses. It's basically a Pirate Lord ability, but only hooks in 1 balloon at a time. But it can hook in bad balloons, but you can only use 2 abilities at a time. Or else it'll be way too broken for late game. Next up is the 000 Monkey Ace. It now has a reverse button, which means whatever direction the Monkey Ace goes, like it goes clockwise with the circle, figure 8, figure infinite, weather. But now there's a button which now allows it to go counterclockwise with that same ace path, on whatever ace path you're going for in a particular game. Here's an interesting thought we had before it was released, before the update got released. We thought that we could just spam the ability and let the ace sit in one spot the entire game. Nope, Nichikiwi thought that through before they even showed it to us. There's a cooldown for the ability, but it's a really short cooldown. I think it's like looks like a 3-second cooldown, it seems like. Yeah, I see the reason why Nichikiwi added this like little detail of a change. It's just so it's not exploitable, where if the ace literally sits in one spot just by pressing the ability, then I can see the reason why there's a cooldown. Just so it's not giving bad habits to players who are trying to get good with the ace micro and everything. Oh, I'm not done with the ace upgrades. There's like 3 more changes to 3 upgrades that got price changed. So first off, Ground Zero was 14k alone, is now 18k. I was wondering if there was a tower that's going to be an $18,000 upgrade alone, where it ends up being $19,440, which shows on hard mode. Well, guess what? Ground Zero takes the place for it. And to be honest, it's a little bit strange why they made Ground Zero really expensive. It's like, if they really thought of that through, they could have done that way sooner in the game. But they just did it right now. But in exchange, just to prevent Tsar Bomber from being too expensive, because it's a $35,000 upgrade, they price buff it down to 30k. But actually, Ground Zero was 4k increased, Tsar Bomber's 5k decrease. So additionally, not only Ground Zero is more expensive than before as a nerf, Tsar Bomber is slightly cheaper, despite being the tier 5 after the tier 4 getting a pretty big price nerf. Which I think is fair, because obviously Tsar Bomber is kind of outclassed by its own tier 4. I'm kind of expecting something like that with like Bomb Path Bomb, because Bomb Blitz is kind of outclassed by Cluster Bomb Spam and all that. Anyways, next up is Flying Fortress. Flying Fortress, Big Plane, ISAB, we know who it is. Went from 100k upgrade to 85k. So which I see reasons why, because like, if I would compare it to like Bloon Exclusion Zone to Flying Fortress just does a little bit more damage, especially better group damage, slightly better targeting, but still messy targeting and all that, and it can pop all Bloon types. Bloon Exclusion Zone is just way cheaper with that similar damage output, so I see the reason why they priced for Flying Fortress. Next up is Comanche Defense, and it got 3 buffs this update, and Comanche Commander got 1 buff in this update. But it actually got more than 1 buff, because most of the buffs that the tier 4 I'm going to be covering up also carry over to the tier 5, so you're going to see a bit of a performance difference for the tier 5 as well in the test for the tier 4. Okay, so the first change that Comanche Defense has gotten is that its missile fire rate has been increased from 3 seconds to 1 second. So it shoots 3 times faster, the missile attack. so it will do much better against lead balloons because obviously the main attack can't pop lead balloons nor the mini Comanches, only their missiles can, so this will be really helpful for the lead rounds in general. The next change is that the main heli now does double damage than it did before, which means every single dart it shoots now does 2 layers of damage, which before, as a 004 main heli, used to do 2 damage per shot, but now it does 4, but with quad darts, instead of doing 4 layers of damage per shot, it now does 8 damage per shot, making the main Comanche more reliable at mid-game as it's supposed to be. Comanche defense's mini-helis now hit an additional balloon per shot, which means they now hit up to 4 balloons per shot instead of 3 balloons per shot, which makes their group damage 25% better than before. If their group damage was already good enough because of the sheer amount of damage they do per shot, that +1 PS is going to make them 25% better than before, make them even more stronger than they already were before. But their group damage wasn't good to begin with, so that +1 PS is really nice for them to have anyways. And here's the big shocking news about the PS buff. This buff also applies to the tier 5 as well. And also, Comanche Commander's PS was just as low as the tier 4s as well before, but now it actually gets the same increased percentage of group damage just like the tier 4, which means it's now 25% better than it was before. But that's not all. The main heli from the Comanche Commander upgrade, the tier 5, now does 3 layers per shot, which makes both of its darts do overall 6 damage per shot, but with quad darts, it will make it up to 12 layers per shot on its own. But obviously you can't really tell the difference, or you won't really see that in a normal game because the mini Comanches are going to be there doing the most damage as usual, unless you do like a very specific test where the mini Comanches don't damage the same balloon as the main heli or so. But it doesn't matter, it's a buff is a buff. It now makes Comanche Commander slightly more than 25% stronger. And yeah, I think the changes for Bomb Path Heli is really good in this update, really promising. Especially for Comanche defense in particular, because that upgrade has been struggling throughout the entire game's lifespan since, well, launch of the entire game. First off, it used to be 1.5k more expensive than before, which means it used to be the same price as an upgrade as Arcane Spike, but obviously with more sellback because Mob Shove was way more expensive than before. And also, the mechanics of the mini Comanches for the tier 4 come out completely different and it compared what it is right now, because obviously right now the mini Comanches come in depending on how many they come out, also depending on how far the balloons get in the track. Like 25% through the track, 1 comes in, 50% through the track, 2 comes in, and then 75% through the track. All 3 of them come out. Before, all 3 of them come out at a random time possible whenever your defense gets overwhelmed. I'm pretty sure it's like 33% of the track. I'm not really sure. I don't know the stats from the... Before they did like a rework on the Comanche defense to where it is right now. But obviously in the recent updates, they're trying to make it more reliable while still keeping that mechanic as usual. Which, to be honest, I like the idea of it. But before it was like... it was just the main heli, and then if your defense gets overwhelmed, all 3 of them come out at once with an extremely long cooldown of 30 seconds or so. I don't know how long it was, but it was so bad that they had to rework the whole mechanics for the tier 4. It was still not good enough, but it was a little bit more reliable. But now they finally probably might hit the spot where the tier 4 is actually now good enough, where the main heli does more damage, and if your defense ever gets a little bit overwhelmed, or... like, depends on how far the balloons get in the track, the mini Comanches then come out to help out, as what they're supposed to be, because obviously it's meant to be a mid-game tower after all. And to be honest, I see a lot of potential with this upgrade. Next up is almost entirety of top half Moab Monkey. Like, almost all of them, like, not the tier 1 upgrade, but from the tier 2 to the tier 5, got like... a good amount of buffs at least. Bunny stuff also has been buffed in this update if you crosspath it with Shell Shock, where it's even more effective than it was before if you crosspath it with Shell Shock, which I will cover up later on. But for now, the 200 Bloon Buster upgrade is now $150 cheaper than it was before. Before it used to be $650 in 29.4, but now it's $500 in 30.0, which makes it literally the same price as Rapid Reload, Bunny Stuff, and even in its own tier 1, Bigger Blast, as $500 as an upgrade alone. There's like now 4 Moab Monkey upgrades that are literally the same price as $500 each. Which is kind of interesting though, because it's like, obviously they all do different things, but they're all worth the same. But anyways, Bloon Buster is now cheaper than it was before, which is cool. Shell Shock also got price buffed as well, on top of Bloon Buster's price. In version 29.4, it used to cost $1,100 as a tier 3 alone, but now in version 30.0, it's now $900 as a tier 3 alone, making it the same price as Heavy Shells, the other tier 3 Moab Monkey upgrade. Shell Shock's price buff alongside with Bloon Buster's price buff now makes the entirety of top half Moab Monkey $350 cheaper in total. Next up is the big one. The big one now does 7 layers per damage on impact instead of 5 layers on impact. Even though for some reason in the description it still says 5 layers, even though it clearly does 7 layers now. The big one definitely felt a little bit weak in my opinion, because obviously against like round 63, the round it's supposed to be shredding at, just somehow barely beats the round, despite having really high PS and good damage output. But now, since it now does plus 2 layers of damage, it now will do a lot more damage to that round, making it a lot more easier to deal with group rounds. And don't get me started with the mob damage. Its mob damage is like non-existent, especially the amount of money you put into the tower. But now it's a little bit more noticeable, at least, especially for the other crosspath, which I will cover up later. Next one is the bigger one. The biggest one. Its center AoE damage has been increased from 20 layers per explosion to 25 layers per explosion, which means it now does 25 layers per damage on its own, but it does additional damage towards ceramics and mobs, which I'm going to get into the ceramics, because here's an interesting thing to talk about. The biggest one's outer AoE ceram damage has been increased from 10 layers to 20 layers on impact. So in version 29.4, it used to do 20 layers of damage towards every balloon in the game, and it used to do an additional 10 layers of damage towards ceramics, making it do 30 layers of damage towards ceramics. But now in version 30.0, it's now base 5 layers, which means it now does an additional 5 layers of damage towards ceramics and mob class balloons. But the ceramic damage has been increased by doubled, where it's now 20. So instead of being 35 towards ceramics, it's now 45 towards ceramics. Because now in version 30.0, the biggest one now does 25 layers of damage towards everything in the game, with an additional plus 10 layers of damage towards ceramics, which is its second buff. So you add those two buffs together, it will now do 45 layers of damage. So it now does 15 extra layers of damage towards ceramics. These changes now make the biggest one define at what job it's supposed to really be, aside from being like a weak-ish but infinite range, massive explosion, high PS type of DPS tower. A ceramic cleanup tower. Man, I wish there was a tower that could do something like this in the near future. Next up is the 302 Moab Monkey, Shell Shock crosspath with Bunny Stuff. Shell Shock now allows the Bunny Stuff upgrade to do twice the amount of damage than it did before with its tick damage, and it also applies to the big one and the biggest one upgrade as well, making them way stronger than they were before. However, the DOT gets shortened by twice the amount as well, so you get the same amount of DPS per shot, but it's just sped up twice as faster than it did before. The Bunny Stuff upgrade has always been the inferior crosspath for both top path and middle path Moab Monkey. It doesn't really matter as much for middle path, because Bloon Buster isn't that much beneficial for Pop and Gnaw in general. But for top half, like the biggest one and the big one, the increased attack speed is massive for it. It's like 70% increased attack speed so versus just having the DOT effect. So it's nice that the DOT effect is also doing damage really fast, like twice as faster than it did before. And also the damage per tick is also even more stronger than before for each of the upgrades progressively. I like to think that the attack speed crosspath is still useful, but only for like cleanup purposes. And then the other crosspath, the Bunny Stuff crosspath, could potentially just be like the pure damage crosspath. The final change with the Moab Monkey is that the big one crosspath with Bunny Stuff now does 5 layers per tick instead of 3 layers per tick. Alongside obviously doing twice the amount of damage with the Bunny Stuff, now doing tick twice as fast like I said before. Nothing too huge, but at least it now makes the 402 crosspath a little bit better to progressively save up for the tier 5. Next up we have the Dotland Gunners. The first upgrade to cover up is the Ray of Doom. In version 29.4, it used to be $95,000 on medium mode, but now in version 30.0, it's now $80,000 on medium mode. There's nothing too special about Ray of Doom's price, aside from where you can actually now afford Ray of Doom in a proper strategy now, but it's still really expensive. Like, you weren't able to get Ray of Doom till like the early 90s, like round 92, round 93, or round 94. You have to get it before round 95, or else it's a dead end for you for that round. And I'm referring to the Downdraft Psy main warp strategy. You can get away with Prince of Darkness and actually get Ray of Doom like probably the end of round 97 to beat round 98, because you can't beat round 98 with just Prince of Darkness, but you can get up to round 98 with Prince of Darkness alone with Azili. My overall thoughts about Ray of Doom is I still think it needs some sort of buff, because I feel like its damage output is not in a good state right now. Like, all of its damage output is just its Pierce. Its single tar damage is worse than the other two tier 5 Dotland guns at the moment, which is shocking because Ray of Doom is the most expensive tier 5 Dotland gunner of the 3. Next up is Rocket Storm, and it not only just got 1, not 2, but 3 nerfs in this update. The first nerf of the 3 it got is that its ability damage output has been reduced from 6 layers per explosion for each missile down to 5 layers for each missile. which means it now does less damage towards groups of balloons and single target balloons whenever you activate the ability in version 3.0. Its second nerf is that its duration has also been reduced from 10 seconds in version 29.4 down to 8 seconds in version 3.0. Which means you have to be even more careful with your ability timings, because its duration now runs out a bit sooner in version 3.0. I know it's weird how I'm already going into conclusions even though I haven't showed you guys about the third nerf already, but I will show in a minute because there's another comparison for it. But for now, the damage and the duration nerf, I kind of find it really unnecessarily because I never think Rocket Storm was broken. I mean, before that, like the other cooldown nerf and the price nerf back in like 5 or 6 updates ago, I don't know how long it was, the other nerfs. Those nerfs were a lot more reasonable, but I don't know why they have to keep nerfing Rocket Storm even further. Like, you're spending over 5k on a ability, so I actually see no reason why they have to nerf it even further. The third and final nerf that the Rocket Storm has received is that the ability, when you activate it, no longer ignores blockers or obstacles, whatever you like to call them. I like to call them obstacles because they're literally in the way and you need to be more versatile with your towers. So in version 29.4, the ability literally ignores them and just flies right through, so you can basically cheese a lot of games by just activating the ability. But now in version 3.0, you can see it just collides into the wall just like the main attack, which makes a lot more sense because I don't know why Rocket Storm just ignores them completely. This nerf and the duration nerf also apply to Buckshot Destroyer's ability as well. The next and final change for the Dotling Gunner is Buckshot crosspathing with focus firing, which is the inferior crosspath, like a 103 Buckshot basically. So in version 29.4, it's literally just increasing the accuracy, but now in version 3.0, not only increases the accuracy, but also increases the lifespan by 25% plus. But to be honest, I still prefer the faster attack speed when I get my balloon exclusion zone. I still think Laser Shark is too weak compared to faster firing for crosspathing Buckshot. Next up we have the Wizard Monkeys. First off is the base Wizard Monkey getting in decreased price by $25, which means in version 29.4 it used to be $400 on medium mode, but in version 3.0 it's now $375 on medium mode, which means it's now $25 cheaper for both top path and bottom path. But Wallfire is now $50 more expensive than it was before as an upgrade, which means Wallfire in version 29.4 it used to be $900 alone, but now in version 3.0 it's now $950 on medium mode. And if you compare it to the base Wizard Monkey's $25 price buff, middle path Wallfire to Wizard or Phoenix is now $25 more expensive than it was before. But to be honest, for the higher tiers it doesn't really matter, but for Wallfire in particular it might affect it the most, which is just a small nerf to Wallfire's price overall. Next up is Arcane Spike. Arcane Spike in version 29.4 used to be $10,900 as an upgrade alone. But now in version 3.0, it's back down to $10,000 alone. Here's a little bit of a story. Arcane Spike has always been the best mid-game option throughout the entire game up until the version 20.0s, where they buffed Dark Knight's Pierce and add Dotling Gunner with 3 new mid-game options. One of them is more like a progressive upgrade to its tier 5, while the other 2 are more like actual mid-game towers such as Plasma Accelerator and Rocket Storm. And the Comanche defense now does more reliable damage as well now, which we might see more of that as well. But the Arcane Spike has fallen off the meta ever since then. It wasn't just because there's other better mid-game options in the current game right now, but it's also because Arcane Spike got a $900 price nerf for no absolute reason. And the problem is that you can't really get rid of that $900 anyways, unless it got price buff, which it just got in version 3.0. With the other mid-game options, most of the money you're spending on them are tier 3s like Laser Cannon, Hydro Rocket Pods, and even Dark Knight, all of its upgrades, because it can be discounted to be even cheaper than before. With Arcane Spike, most of the money you put into the tower for its performance is mostly the tier 4 itself. Long story short, hopefully Arcane Spike's price buff was enough for it to be good enough. The next and last changes for the Wizard Monkey is entirety of Bomb Path Wizard Monkey. So we know that Shimmer used to have the same range as the base Wizard Monkey, which is 40% range per unit. But now, in version 3.0, it now has 60% range per unit, which is the same amount as an Arcane Mastery, and Necromancer gets that buff as well. But however, Prince of Darkness got a range nerf, which means in version 29.4, it used to have double the amount of range than the base Wizard, which was 80 range per unit, but now it got reduced down to 60, which is the same as Shimmer and Necromancer's range as well. So basically, you can now use Shimmer's range as an indicator to how much range you're going to have with Necromancer or Prince of Darkness for later on in that same game. So, my overall thoughts on the change. I think Necromancer having more 4 coverage is great, because then at least it can spawn the zombie balloons a bit further back than it usually did. But Prince of Darkness's range nerf, on the other hand, the only map I have a complaint on is Bazaar now, because it used to spawn the zombie balloons behind the van and the sand building in version 29.4, but it now spawns the zombie balloons on top of the bridge near itself, which isn't any particularly good, because it now has less time to build up the zombie balloons to take out the balloons. Like, you can see those rainbow balloons just ran right past Prince of Darkness, giving it no time to, you know, take them out with the zombie balloons. But hey, at least it's better anywhere else, as long as there's not any other maps like Bazaar. I'm not done yet. Necromancer's zombie balloon travel distance has also been reduced in units, which means in version 29.4, the zombie balloons used to travel about 250 units on the track, but in version 30.0, now they can only travel up to 175 units on the track. But if you crosspath Necromancer with Guy Magic as a 104 wizard, the travel distance gets back up to 250 per unit, but obviously you have to crosspath it in one path, so you can't have War 5 with that lifespan anymore. This change also applies to Prince of Darkness as well. The zombie morph distance has also been reduced from 300 units down to 225 units while they're traveling on the balloon path. But obviously if you crosspath it with Guy Magic, it goes back up to 300. The zombie BFB's travel distance has also been reduced from 200 units on the track down to 150 units on the track if you just go straight for Prince of Darkness, or if you don't crosspath it with Guy Magic. But if you crosspath it with Guy Magic, it actually gets increased. It went from 200 units up to 225 units, so you actually get a little bit of a benefit if you crosspath Guy Magic with Prince of Darkness as well. My overall thoughts on these changes is that I honestly don't really care about the lifespan change, because I always go for top path Prince of Darkness anyways. Yeah, I'm a true monster. But the reason why is because Warfire doesn't really get much use on split path maps, and I always play like maps like Bazaar, Spillway. Like, Warfire is not going to attack every balloon anyways, so I always go for Guy Magic, so Prince of Darkness's main attack does a little bit more benefit in that way. So now Top Half having a longer lifespan makes Top Half even better. In fact, it makes it a little bit of a buff, because the BFB lifespan is now longer than it was before, so I'll take it. The next tower that got a lot of changes in this update is the Super Monkey. The first upgrade that got a massive change in this update is the Plasma Blast upgrade. Plasma Blast used to be $4,500 in version 29.4 as an upgrade alone, but now in version 3.0, it got a substantially massive price buff all the way down to $3,000 as a tier 2 upgrade in version 3.0. But Plasma Blaster's PS has also been reduced a little bit as well. So that means Plasma Blaster's PS in version 29.4 used to be 3 PS by default, but now in version 3.0 it's been reduced down to 2 PS, which is about the same amount of PS you get with the Laser Blast 100 Super Monkey. But of course you get extra attack speed and lead pump power on top of it as well, for another 3k. So my overall thoughts on these changes is that I thought this was like the most controversial change I thought was going to be there. But to be honest, it wasn't as bad as I thought, because the reason why, because these changes onto Plasma Blast do affect Robo Monkey and Dark Knight's performance, which means they're additionally 1.5k cheaper, well, not really with Dark Knight and Robo Monkey, which I'll get into later, because they've been changed a little bit, but their PS has also been a little bit reduced as well. Because Robo Monkey with Plasma Blast in the other update used to be 8 PS, but now in version 3.0 it's 7 PS, and for Dark Knight, I think it was 6 PS? Yeah, no, it was 7 PS with Plasma Blast in version 29.4, but now it's down to 6 PS in version 3.0, because Plasma Blast no longer gives additional PS, it just gives extra attack speed now. I played a lot of games with Dark Knight with Plasma Blast and Robo Monkey with Plasma Blast, and to be honest, with them having slightly less PS on top of being 1.5k cheaper than they were before, is actually quite a huge buff to them actually. It's more of a buff than a nerf, to be honest. Because you're taking away 1 PS away from an 8 PS tower like Robo Monkey, so it's now down to 7 PS, which is like losing about 1/8 of its PS. And for Dark Knight, you're taking away 1 PS away from a 7 PS tower, so you're taking away 1/7 of Dark Knight's PS. And on top of that, Plasma Blast is now 1.5k cheaper than it was before. It's like they wanted to get slapped in the face to earn that $1,500 as a reward. In my opinion, personally, this is a good change, because Plasma Blast has been a little bit of a standout tier 2 upgrade, because it has been the most expensive tier 2 upgrade. It still is, but not as outstanding as it was before, because Epic Range and Ultra Vision were not as good as Plasma Blast. But now the performance is now a lot more slimmer, but Plasma Blast is still really good as an upgrade. I think this is a great change. Next up is all 3 of the tier 3 Super Monkey upgrades, the Sun Avatar, Robo Monkey, and Dark Knight. The Sun Avatar in version 29.4 used to cost $22,000 as an upgrade alone on medium mode, but now in version 3.0 it's now a $20,000 upgrade alone on medium mode. There's one thing I forgot to mention. Sun Avatar's PS is not affected by Plasma Blast's PS nerf, which means Sun Avatar's PS remains at 6, while Plasma Blast is like the only upgrade that got changed. Which means Robo Monkey and Dark Knight crosspath with Plasma Blast is affected, Sun Avatar isn't, because obviously it's a tier 3 after the tier 2. And it will just be an unintentional nerf, because Sun Avatar at the moment isn't the most meta upgrade in the game. But instead, not only is $2,000 cheaper than it was before, but also Plasma Blast's 1.5k price buff is also affecting Sun Avatar as well, or entirety of Top Half Super Monkey, which makes entirety of Top Half $3,500 cheaper than before, which is pretty huge for Sun Avatar in particular. The next upgrade is Robo Monkey, and it used to cost $8,400 on medium mode as an upgrade in version 29.4, but now in version 30.0, it's now just a plain $8,000 upgrade alone. I don't have much else to say about the upgrade aside from it being a pretty nice price buff in general, especially when you crosspath it with Plasma Blast, because obviously that's the better crosspath, you always want to go for it, there's no reason to go for knockback. Plasma Blast with Robo Monkey now makes Robo Monkey in general $1,900 cheaper than before, because you combine the $400 price buff that Robo Monkey has got alongside with the $1,500 price buff that Plasma Blast has gotten together. The next upgrade is Dark Knight. Dark Knight in version 29.4 used to cost $5,500 on medium mode alone, but now in version 30.0 it's just an extra $100, which means it's now a $5,600 upgrade alone in version 30.0. I can see the reason why they did this change, it's just so Dark Knight does not benefit too much from Plasma Blast's price buff, because Plasma Blast, like I said again, is now 1.5k cheaper than it was before, but obviously if you combined it with Dark Knight's price nerf with Plasma Blast's price buff, it'll be 1.4k cheaper in total. And also, Dark Knight is the only tier 3 Super Monkey that got a price nerf rather than a price buff, unlike Robo Monkey and Sun Avatar, the other tier 3 Super Monkeys. And also, the reason is because Dark Knight kinda outperforms Robo Monkey and Sun Avatar for mid-game, because like maps like Muddy Puddles, Bloody Puddles, Hashtag Ouch, etc., those maps, it's simply because Dark Knight has a teleportation ability and you can make it focus down on a particular lane much more effectively and more reliably. And also, even though it's really expensive without giving it discounts, if you first start off the Super Monkey in between two discount villages in a very weird spot, and then once you get Dark Knight, you can teleport anywhere in the map you want into a more favorable spot, which you can't do with Robo Monkey or Sun Avatar unless you have to spend extra amounts of money just to make them do enough damage. Which I meant by like placing two different Robo Monkeys in two different spots, like on Muddy Puddles, Bloody Puddles, Hashtag Ouch, etc. Like the good spots you would place with Dark Knight, but instead you replace them with Robo Monkeys or Sun Avatars. Imagine how that would look like. It would be very interesting, but also at the same time kind of stupid, because you have to give them both discount villages, which ends up being way too expensive because you have to give them two separate discount villages for that reason, or one of them having discount village. And then at the same time, like if you don't give them the discount villages, you have to spend extra amount of money on them than you have to, compared to like teleporting the Dark Knights from a really weird spot where the discount villages really are to make them cheap enough, and teleport them into a better spot to defend more reliably, while saving up a lot more money as well. So, the price nerf. I don't really think it really matters because you're just adding another $100 to a $5,500 upgrade where it was before. And also you have to spend even more money on Plasma Blast, so the money's even more dwarfed from it. So anyways, moving on. Next up is Dark Champion, and in version 3.0, it now does +2 damage towards ceramic balloons only. Mobs and balloons are unaffected, because this is only a particular type of balloon it can now do extra damage towards to. Dark Champion definitely needed this particular buff for the longest time, because outside of giving it Plasma Blast to make it do more damage, Dark Champion's raw DPS without Plasma Blast's help sucks so badly against ceramics. Like every single shot was 2 shots per damage, which was like almost nothing, especially for like over $70,000 in the amount of money you're spending to it, and it just does very little damage to ceramics. The reason why it can still solo the ceramics is because it holds them in place, but now it does double the amount of damage than it did before, making both crosspath actually feasible to use to make Dark Champion actually somewhat useful into late game. Long story short, this is a great buff for it. The next and last change for the Super Monkey upgrade is Legend of the Night. In this update, it got 2 different changes, so let me go through one of them. So the first one is that in version 29.4, it used to cost $240,000 as a tier 5 alone. But now in version 3.0, it's now a plain $200,000 as a tier 5 alone. But the second change it got is that its passive ability cooldown would carry on if the tower is sold and rebought. Which means if you sold Legend of the Night in version 29.4, regardless if it's on cooldown or not with the portal being activated and all that, you could just sell the tower and just refresh the cooldown that way. So what they did in version 3.0 is that you can't do that anymore, which means if you buy and sell back Legend of Night, the cooldown still carries over regardless if the tower is sold or not. It will just not activate until you get Legend of Night back after the cooldown is finished initially. I don't really have much else to say about these changes aside from that Legend of Night being slightly cheaper is quite nice. It's because I only use Legend of Night if I want to try and get Eventual True Sun God in boss balloon events, or if I'm trying to go for the highest round possible in late game, which I don't really do anymore, really. So that $40,000 price bump is quite nice regardless. And for the portal cooldown rework, I think it had to be done because the thought of just like not playing the game properly by selling and buying back a tower that just leaks a very powerful balloon such as the bad balloon on purpose, which makes you leak no lives at all. I mean, that's the point in Legend of Night, but the thought of just selling and buying back the tower, regardless if it's on cooldown or not, was a little ridiculous. So making it where if you buy and sell back the tower and it still doesn't work anymore, and there's still an initial cooldown regardless if it's in the game or not, is a lot more balanced because it's still there and still can insta-kill bad balloons, but you can't exploit it anymore. Which in my opinion, I find it fair. Next up is the base 000 Druid. In version 29.4, it used to cost $425 on medium mode, but now in version 3.0, it now just costs a plain $400, which means you can now afford it alongside with the base 000 Dot Monkey in Chimps mode. Next up is Top Half Druid, which means from tier 3 to tier 5, starting with the Druid of the Storm. So in version 29.4, it used to cost $1,850 on medium mode alone, but now in version 3.0, it now costs $1,650 on medium mode alone, which means it got an overall $200 price buff on its own. So if we're going to use Druid of the Storm in a particular strategy, like if you're just going to use Druid of the Storm for like blowback and all that, the $200 price buff isn't going to really change the late game that much anyways, but it's there regardless. But if we're going to talk about its spamming strategy, the Druid of the Storm Oban spam strategy, then hell yeah, the $200 price buff is going to make a big difference for each individual Druids, because Oban now gives Druid of the Storm an additional layer of damage towards mob class balloons, making them very price efficient towards mob class balloons, at least for mid game. The only problem I have with the strategy is that it's a little bit wacky in late game, which means it's not 100% reliable, even if you have like about 10 or 20 of them. Like, I think, well, the most you can get is like probably like 12 or something. It wouldn't be enough to beat round 98. Even with support like Mob Glue, Mob Press, they get overwhelmed by groups of mobs because their PS is quite low. So it's either it's missing something or they're just not good enough in general, regardless of the price buff or not. Next up is Ball Lightning. In version 29.4, it used to cost $5,100 on medium mode alone, but now in version 3.0, it's now just $4,500 on medium mode alone, which means it got an overall $600 price buff as a tier 4 alone. Well, actually, I think $800 because Druid of the Storm also got price buffed at the same time, so it's actually overall $800 cheaper than it was before. But that's not all. Ball Lightning's performance has also been improved as well, which means its already existing attack, the Druid of the Storm blowback, the Whirlwind attack, you know, the tier 3. They finally realized that Ball Lightning was not good enough for its price, especially when it's just one attack such as Ball Lightning, so they decided to enhance its other attack in that same path, which is Whirlwind, the Druid of the Storm upgrade, by making the blowback distance increase by 50 more units for both the minimum blowback distance and the maximum blowback distance. The maximum blowback distance means it's like the furthest that the balloon can get blown by from a single blowback attack, and the minimum is the minimum, which is the opposite, which means the least blowback effect, like the least knockback and all that. So basically, the minimum blowback distance has been increased from 100 units to 150 units, and the maximum blowback distance has been increased from 200 units to 250 units. And now finally, Ball Lightning now makes the Whirlwind attack hit up to 60 balloons per blowback instead of 30, which means it can now blow about 60 balloons at once instead of 30. And finally, Ball Lightning would now have a 25% chance of freezing a balloon when it's interacting with the balloon as the projectile itself. What I meant by 25%, I meant like not every balloon that's interacting with the Ball Lightning will get frozen. But there's a monkey knowledge that will allow it to do it, however. The Cold Front monkey knowledge, which used to do exactly what Ball Lightning has received, which is freezing a balloon 25% of the time if the projectile hovers over the balloon, which means every time a balloon gets touched by the Ball Lightning, every single balloon that gets touched by the Ball Lightning with the monkey knowledge on will 100% guarantee get frozen by it instead of being 25% chance of the time. My overall thoughts on the Ball Lightning changes is that I definitely feel like it needed these changes for the longest time, because spending about 5.5k alone just for a Ball Lightning projectile to do something count thing was very underwhelming because it can't even solo ceramics. Like the Druid itself can't even solo like only like a few ceramics in like the mid 50s. Like even though it's at a price of being able to handle them. But obviously its mob damage isn't good either, so it couldn't even do neither of them. So what was ball lightning supposed to do? So they buffed it to make it slightly cheaper as 4.5k or 4.8k in chimps, alongside making its blowback more effective or utility effect, which definitely makes ball lightning a much better Bloon type utility tower for mid game. The next and last change for the Druid is Superstorm, and it got a huge price buff, especially for the tower it is right now. So in version 29.4, it used to cost $80,000 on medium mode alone, but now in version 30.0, it now just costs $65,000 on medium mode alone, which means it's overall $15,000 cheaper than it was before. Oh my god, that's a huge price buff. Superstorm is now much more affordable on chimps mode without being too much of a hassle to afford it, because in version 29.4, you weren't able to get Superstorm till round 94 and round 93. But now you'll be able to afford Superstorm by like round 86, 87, somewhere around that region with its price, as long as the defense is like easy enough to afford it, like Prince of Darts and Azili. But on the other hand, Superstorm can only blow back Zemges for half the distance in version 3.0. To be honest, it doesn't make the round any harder at all, because Superstorm already makes the Zemges get blown back far enough because of how slow they are, so only getting blown back for half the distance is pretty fair because they're pretty big balloons. And it also makes the rounds less stolly as well, so I'll count this as a buff. Next up is Primary Expertise. It got an increased attack speed buff, which means in version 29.4, in between attacks, it takes 3 seconds in version 29.4, but now in version 3.0, it has been decreased down to 2.5 seconds in between attacks, which means Primary Expertise now attacks slightly faster than it did before. I don't really have much else to say about this change aside from trying to make the tower a little bit more of a duo type tower or synergize in strategies a little bit more effectively instead of just being like a spammable strategy like Cluster Bomb spam, Moab Mauler spam, which are the two strongest strategies in the game right now. That synergizes with Primary Expertise in that particular strategy. So it's nice that Primary Expertise now attacks a little bit faster just so it does a little bit more than just being a decreased priced kind of upgrade. The next and last upgrade to cover up is the 014 Bloon Trap, which means Bloon Trap crosspath with large surface area. We all know that the large surface area now allows the Bloon Trap to place its Bloon Trap anywhere in the map it wants. Anywhere in the map, like you can place it out of bounds, which will make like the blues not get hit by it at all, which caused a lot of problems like soft locking the Bloon Trap, like especially the tier 5 where you can't really reset the trap until the trap actually gets eaten up by the balloons themselves. But now in version 3.0 they did a change where every time you target to a different and more favorable spot, just to give the trap more variety of where you want to place it, will now reset the trap. I've been playing around with this change by playing a lot of chimps games, because obviously you know me from my other videos and all that. I did a chimps game with XXL trap with the large service area, like maps like Chutes, High Finance, and even Inferno, which isn't really that much beneficial, but you see what I'm talking about. The fact of replacing the old trap with the new trap with its resetting its HP as well is a pretty good change, especially when you're trying to place a newly fresh trap in a better spot. And now into the heroes. Finally, it took like basically a whole month of this editing just to get to the heroes. But anyways, so Quincy at level 17 will now additionally make the explosive arrows appear in every second shot instead of every third shot in version 3.0. I don't really have much else to say about this change aside from being like a minor buff to Quincy in general. It's a good buff, but it's not enough to make Quincy any much better in late game in general, especially comparing to the other damaging type heroes like Sada, Etienne, or Sai. Ever since the other damaging heroes were added into the game, Quincy really just became a very niche, very hard black border type hero for the most part. And now into the final changes in this update, which is Admiral Brickell. The first change to talk about is her level 8. So now in version 3.0, it now also grants a permanent +1 PS to all water towers in her radius. I've already done a chimps game based on the buff in a video if you guys want to check it out. And to be honest, personally, it's a good buff, but it's not broken or outstanding either. It's probably just there just so that her level 3 ability, when it's off cooldown, at least your water towers would do more damage than they usually would without the buff itself. The next two changes are pretty simple, but not really that outstanding to be honest. But at level 15, version 3.0, Brickell now makes her revolver attack do 9 layers of damage per shot instead of 7. And when she's at level 17, it goes up to 11 layers per damage instead of 9 or 7. Like I said, it's nothing super outstanding at all. It's just there just so Brickell kind of scales into late game a little bit better with her damage output. Even though she's a support hero, just like every other support hero like Gwendolyn, it's just there, but it's nothing outstanding either. Oh my god, this video took me a month to edit, and I'm finally done with the voiceovers. That's the longest part about the video, was the voiceovers. And I'm sorry that it took this long just to get this stupid video out. And then probably after this video is done, NinjaQ is just going to release another patch note update just so my suffering keeps going, but in a different type of video. But anyways, I would really appreciate if you guys give this video a massive thumbs up, or even subscribe possibly, because this video took me a whole month just to edit. Like, the actual update itself was released like the beginning of February. And that was like over a month ago, and now we're like in between the middle and end of March. Like, just for making a patch note comparison video. Usually it's not meant to be this long. Well, actually it kind of was with the first time I did this type of format video. Back with version 26.0 versus 27.0, which was like half a year ago at this point. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, because it was a long journey for me to edit this video. And see you guys later. Bye.